On this episode, Marcelo Garcia is considered by many to be the best Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner in the world, and he's known as the king of scramble. I think there's something that we can learn from that and apply to water-sensitive urban design. Hey everyone, and welcome back to Ideanthro for another That's Like WSUD episode, where we take an idea or a concept that we've heard about, read about, learnt about, and try and apply it back to water-sensitive urban design so that we can see what we can take from it, see what we can tease out to improve this practice of water-sensitive urban design. In today's episode, it's another idea from Josh Waitzkin. So, former child chess star turned world champion in martial arts turned expert learner and teacher. I'm actually going to kick this off so this thought comes from an interview that Josh gave to Tim Ferriss a couple of years ago. I'm actually going to kick this off by playing what Josh said, and we'll give it some context and talk about it.
One beautiful thing about Marcelo is, people call him the king of scramble, and if you watch his training style, he's always in transition, which is a really interesting idea to think about in a cross-disciplinary manner. Because most people get their egos involved in their training and they're trying to dominate all the time. And to dominate in almost anything, you find a position of dominance and you keep it. But Marcelo always lets his opponents move, and so he's constantly playing in transition. And so if you think about what world-class martial arts means, and you brought up, for example, Maurice Ashley.
Okay, so there Josh was describing Marcelo Garcia, who is considered to be, by many, to be the greatest Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu practitioner ever, so BJJ being a martial art. And he's describing how Marcelo is renowned for not necessarily being the best in any given position. So two wrestlers on the ground, locked together in a given position. But Marcelo being the best at transitioning between positions. So they'll be in one position and best at how getting to the next position and getting to the next position. And he might not even be dominant in, if you just was to hypothetically set up a situation where you had to hold one particular position. He might not be dominant in any given position in isolation, but in combination with the change between positions, he becomes incredibly dominant. And this got me thinking about water-sensitive urban design, because as we've talked about before here, water-sensitive urban design is a journey from nothing water-sensitive in our cities to hopefully a water-sensitive future. And we are somewhere just taking the first little baby steps on that journey. And so if that's the case, what I've noticed here is we've gone from one paradigm where there was nothing ostensibly water sensitive in our cities, and some policies and some practices have been implemented that got us a step forward. And so each of these different positions, so nothing, a step forward, a bunch more steps as we go, and then ultimately whatever a water sensitive city looks like. All of these different steps are akin to the positions that Marcelo Garcia would be in wrestling. So, taking someone's back or in a particular hold. These are all particular positions. And it's all well and good to get good at any given one of those. And it is important, definitely, to have a base level of competence in them. But the truth here is that in the same way that to win a fight in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you need to be able to roll through multiple positions. It's highly unlikely, unless you finish the fight very quickly, that you're going to win in any one given position. It's much more likely that if you're going to win a fight, you're going to need to be able to transition through multiple ones. Well, it's the same for water-sensitive urban design. If we're going to get to this water-sensitive future, it's highly unlikely that we're just going to magically jump there. We actually are going to have to step through a whole bunch of different steps. So to do that, we have a couple of options. Either we can try and be comfortable and be the expert and be the best and dominate in every single one of those positions, or we can conceptually try and become comfortable with the fact that it will change and just become comfortable with how that changes and the underlying principles. And this really comes back to principles here. This is something else that Josh talks about, which is, okay, there's a couple of different levels of understanding something. You can understand how something is done. So I'll relate this back to my own experience riding in the sport of bike trials. So there might be a maneuver. Let's pick the right maneuver here. We're going to pick two maneuvers here. One of them is a pedal up where you ride towards an obstacle front on and then you jump up onto it with a little bit of momentum, and another one being a front move where you're hopping on the back wheel of the bike and jumping frontwards onto the obstacle. Well, say if you learn the pedal up first, one principle that you'll learn in that is that, yeah, you need to pick the front wheel up so that it gets over the obstacle, but you only want to pick it up just enough that it just gets over the obstacle. Any higher that you go then starts to take, with the front wheel, then actually starts to inhibit and take away your ability to pick the back wheel up and get it up there. So there's a balance. You need to get the front wheel up just enough that it gets over, but any more is actually then inhibiting your ability to get the back wheel up. So you could learn the skill of just how to do the pedal up, but if you've internalized that fundamental principle that I just described, which is you want the front to be really quite low on that move to enable the back to get up, if you internalize that principle, it will help you when you come to do the front gap forwards, because that is all about jumping from back wheel and landing front wheel on an obstacle. That also requires you to only barely take the front wheel over the obstacle. So there's two different levels of understanding here. You can understand just how to do the moves, or you can understand the fundamental principles that are sitting behind it. And of course, there's more principles behind both of those moves, but that's just to give an understanding of, understanding a single topic or understanding the principles. I think that when it comes to water-sensitive urban design, sometimes I'm picking up on a little bit of we've got to this one paradigm of, okay, this is the way we're doing things. And people get a little bit defensive now, sometimes when we talk about, needing to change certain elements or improve on certain elements. And I think a part of this is that we get really comfortable with being really good and really proficient at the current stage. We get really good at being good at the pedal up, or being good at this particular Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu hold. But then the uncertainty of the transition is what's going to happen? I don't know where we're going to go. So then any talk of change is inherently threatening and inherently makes us feel nervous and uncertain. But that change has to occur if we're going to get to water-sensitive urban design. So what's the choice? The choice here is really clearly simple. To instead of, to definitely need to practice a core skill set and a core ability within the current framework of water-sensitive urban design that we're in. So in the same way that you get good at doing a pedal up, or get good at a given grappling position, get good within the current framework, but make sure that we actually learn the fundamental underlying principles of, why was that framework set up the way it is? What are its relative strengths and weaknesses? How does that compare to where we need to go to? Because by understanding those fundamental principles, that when we do take the next step in this water-sensitive journey from nothing to where we currently are to something else, water-sensitive city, when we do eventually take that next step, that we can fall back on the principles in order to then set us up so that we can do become good at the next step. We were comfortable with this one, we understand the principles, so we scramble, like Marcelo Garcia scrambles. We scramble and get into the next one in a solid position as well. So how do we do that? This is about having a fundamental, solid understanding of where the waterway science is at, about where policy is at. How you doing? About where waterway policy is at, and by understanding this sound fundamental knowledge, we can assess changes against those principles. And we might not like all the changes. We might not like what the new scenario brings. Marcelo Garcia might not like in the scramble of changing between different Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu positions. He might not like where his opponent puts him in the next one, but he trusts that because he will scramble and get there first, that it might not be his favourite position, but he'll trust himself that he can get there better than his opponent can, get there earlier than his opponent can, get better set up, and possibly in his case, better ready to transition and scramble to another position that he does like a little bit more. So in this instance, with water-sensitive urban design, we might not even like what the next policy setting, we might love the current policy setting, and maybe the next policy setting on a step forward, we actually don't like it because it's not the way that we would choose to do it. We might choose to do something different. But if we understand the fundamental principles about what waterways need, about how this policy might work, etc., 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 then we're still in a good position to scramble into that next paradigm, do fine in it, do well enough in it, and then scramble back out to one that we like even better. And that's the lesson from this. I like this analogy. you'll probably pick up from this because I have a background in competitive sports that I like these sporting analogies. They make sense to me. I hope that they make sense to you as well, and I hope that you enjoyed. As always with Ideanthro, if you've watched this episode and you've gone, that makes sense to me, or no, that doesn't make sense to me, and you want to get involved in the conversation, by all means hit me up. There's a few ways that you can find us. You can find us at www.ideanthro.com. There is a connect link. You can connect with us that way. You can find all the videos on YouTube. Just search Ideanthro. You can I post all the videos to Facebook. That's www.facebook.com/Ideanthro. And I've even started posting this stuff to LinkedIn, which is what I should really do now because I have a video that has come out this morning and I haven't posted it yet. So I'm off to do that. Have a good one.